So Bezel's second way is making a bezel for an oddly shaped stone, a beautiful pink tourmaline that has a very low dome, but soldering that bezel down to the backing sheet of 18 karat gold. So look what happens to the color when you put that on here. So my design decision is to leave this closed at the back so that the gold behind the stone reflects through the stone and pops the color. So here's the pink tourmaline and the green tourmaline. Oh, look at that color. Isn't that beautiful? Stones are so beautiful and yummy that you may want to purchase a stone that is cut like this, but the best solution is we also put it in an open back bezel so that the bearing wire is actually absorbing the height of the belly at the back of the bezel. So we'll get to that in a minute. And then this guy, the ends of this are slightly tapered inward, and the sides of the stone are like a normal cabochon. So my measurement in this case would be at the side of the stone to accommodate. So you can see that, here we go. That would be the final height. Even though the end of the stone is going to come up proud above that bezel, there's enough width around the edge and the corners to trap that stone into place, no matter whether it's in an open back or closed back bezel. So I've already zoomed ahead and made my 22 karat gold bezel for the tourmaline. But to review how I'm determining the height of this bezel is the ends of these are sort of tapered inward. I'm measuring to the side where that edge begins to be a little quicker on the cabochon. So here I'm measuring the stone, and then this is how I determined the height for the bezel. But I've gone in and soldered everything shut, but haven't cleaned up the bezel wall yet. So I'll do that before I solder it down to the backing sheet. But you can tell that that is not going to give me much trouble. And if all goes well, when I solder it down to the sheet, it will look just like that. So we're going to set that aside. And I'll actually make the bezel for this guy so that you can see how it's done. So again, I'm reading the stone. It's a nice flat back pink tourmaline. That would be too high. That's the marking for the green tourmaline. So I need to set my dividers. If you're used to working in fine silver, this is a little bit different a process because of just the general hardness of the wire. So the more that you're able to control the outcome with annealing, the easier the process will be. Now we're ready to solder. So again, I'm pick soldering with hard 18 karat gold solder. And now I'm ready to take my annealed 18 karat sheet metal, and this is 24 gauge, approximately a half of an inch or a little less. So I'm going to solder the bezel down to the backing sheet and drop down to medium solder. I'll be pick soldering, but putting the medium solder on the outside of the bezel. So if there is a ghost, I can clean it up from the outside without having to use tiny tools or grind away the inside of the back of my bezel, which you could then see through the stone. So in this case, solder placement will be on the outside. If I were doing the same thing with an opaque stone, I would probably put the solder on the inside of the bezel where the stone covers it up. So I'll be using a little bit of the MIT flux just to keep oxide scale and use it as a self-pickling color saver for the gold. I don't use a whole lot of flux. I use enough to just get the job done and not have a lot of oxide scale. Sometimes people will use too much flux and then the little bits they're soldering down float all around on the surface. And you don't really want that. You want just enough to let the chemicals do their thing and give you a visual indicator of temperature. So now I'll be cutting some medium, I'm going to go down to medium 18 karat yellow solder. And I'll also be using 4 fairly large pallions of solder and placing them at quadrant points, north, south, east, and west. And then heating from above to be able to control the temperature and heat from the outside above the bezel, so that you're not risking melting the bezel, but you're heating up the base sheet. Now, if you noticed, for cost-saving measures, I've left a little bit, there will be a little bit of scrap here, but I like to be able to give myself the opportunity to have a little bit extra so that I can change my mind in design, or maybe I want to make a rim here. I don't really know yet what I'm doing, but this will be trimmed off later. But you need a little bit, just enough around your bezel to allow the little bit of solder you're putting on the outside, give it a place to rest that's safe. So again, I'm going to spike the heat on the inside of the bezel, and I'm using the outside edge of that bezel and backing plate and heating that up. So reading the flux is an indication of temperature when you're ready to go. And there we go. So that's medium solder flowing. And if all things are going well, your entire solder weld should go all the way around your bezel, and you should not have any overflow on the inside of the bezel cup. After this is pickled, you want to check and make sure that you don't have any gaps at the base of the bezel where it joins to the sheet. I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to move forward now and just show you the cleanup for this bezel for the green tourmaline, and then we can solder that down. So this little solder ghost here needs to be cleaned up, and then I have to sand the bottom that's being attached to the backing sheet. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the bezel to the backing plate for the green tourmaline. So here's another tip. If you're wanting to check and make sure everything is good to go and your bezel fits properly, take a piece of Teflon satin dental floss and put that in your bezel cup first. Put your stone in, so that if for some reason your bezel is tight and your wax doesn't work, this is sticky wax, you have another fallback plan of just being able to use the dental floss to take the stone out. But in this case, my bezel is the right size, so I don't have to worry about that. Now I have my bezel with the backing plate soldered on for my pink tourmaline, and I have to do the rest of my cleanup. So this area will be all trimmed away by sawing with a number 4/0 or 6/0 blade in my jeweler's saw, and then I will go in lightly file and then radial bristle brush and then pumice wheel. So once I've done a coarse filing, now I'm going to come in with my pumice wheel and finish the job.